Right now, as you are watching this, Spain and France are fighting their largest wildfires on record near the towns of Avila and Gironde, fires that erupted directly out of the fourth heat wave to strike Europe this summer. And French officials in the Gironde region have already banned public events until the 8th of August because they expect dangerous fire conditions to persist at least that long. That fourth wave arrived in France and Spain around the 29th and 30th of July, right on schedule, exactly as forecasters had predicted days in advance. And now, before that fourth wave has even finished burning through the wildfires it started, meteorologists are already tracking a fresh, more expansive heat dome building across the entire continent for the start of August, one forecast to push temperatures past 40 degrees Celsius widely, with some areas potentially reaching as high as 45 degrees Celsius. This is the story of a European summer that has stopped producing single heat waves and started producing an almost continuous rolling pattern of them, and why the meteorologists watching the models right now say the next one is already forming before the last one has even finished. No hype, no exaggeration, just what the data says and why it matters. Drop a comment and tell me if you're anywhere near this and how many separate heat waves you've personally lived through this summer. I read every one of these. If you want grounded coverage instead of panic headlines, subscribe. It is free, and a like helps this reach more people who need to see it. Let us go for 5,000 likes on this one. Thank you. Now let us get into it. To understand why forecasters are already bracing for a new wave, you need the shape of the summer that came before it. Europe's 2026 heat season did not arrive. As one event, it arrived as 4 separate waves stacked back to back with barely any real recovery time in between. The first hit in May. The second in June shattered national heat records across more than a dozen countries and pushed the continent's confirmed heat death toll past 6,000 people, with separate statistical modeling suggesting the true toll from that wave alone likely runs several times higher once the full data is finally analyzed. The third wave built through most of July, driven by a stubborn area of high pressure that meteorologists describe as a heat dome, a lid that traps hot air underneath it and lets the sun bake it hotter day after day with nowhere for it to escape. And now the fourth wave, the one currently burning through Spain and France, arrived at the end of July exactly as models had projected, bringing with it the wildfires now forcing evacuations and event cancellations across both countries. What makes the current moment genuinely different from the 3 waves before, it is the scale of what is forecast to come next. According to meteorologists tracking the pattern, the heat is expected to expand across most of the continent by the end of July and continue straight into August, with the new heat dome centering over the Iberian Peninsula and France first, then spreading into Germany, the Baltic region, Central Europe, and the Mediterranean, an area where tens of millions of people are currently on summer vacation. The atmospheric pattern behind it has been described by forecasters as a classic omega block, named because the shape it traces across a weather map, a tall ridge of high pressure flanked by 2 deep troughs, one on each side, resembles the Greek letter omega. Once that shape locks into place, it does not just produce a few hot days, it can stall the same weather pattern over the same region for a week or more, which is exactly the mechanism that drove the extreme long-duration heat of the third wave through most of July. Long-range forecast models are now pointing to that same locked pattern persisting well beyond the start of August. Ensemble modeling from the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasts shows a low-pressure trough sitting near the Gulf of Alaska, an elongated trough stretched across an unusually warm patch of the North Atlantic, and a ridge of high pressure extending directly into Europe, fed in part by marine heat waves sitting in the Mediterranean Sea and off Europe's southwestern coast. For the second week of August specifically, that same modeling shows continued heat draining what little soil moisture remains across the continent as the ongoing drought keeps expanding, with forecasters explicitly describing the overall trend as hotter and drier than the historical norm for that stretch of the calendar. Looking further out, to the third week of August, the same models show the heat wave gradually shifting eastward, expanding into the western Black Sea region as the pattern that started over Iberia slowly migrates across the continent rather than breaking down entirely. Ioana Vergini, founder of the weather forecasting platform WFY24, told Euronews Earth that as of the early July seasonal outlooks, every major forecasting model was tilting toward a warmer than normal August across Europe, with the strongest and most confident signal for renewed extreme heat sitting specifically over the Mediterranean and southeastern Europe. She pointed to a set of recurring heat clusters, regions the models keep flagging over and over as the most likely areas to bear the brunt of whatever comes next, including Iberia, Italy, Greece, and parts of the Balkans. That kind of repeated model agreement across independent forecasting centers is exactly the kind of signal meteorologists take seriously when deciding how confident to be in a forecast that still stretches several weeks into the future. It is worth being honest, though, that not every forecast agrees on the details, and that disagreement matters for how confident you should be in any single specific number. One broader seasonal outlook for August described the overall picture as heat arriving in recurring waves, with only moderate to higher confidence hot periods repeatedly, interrupted by fronts moving in off the Atlantic, and specifically flagged that a full 7 to 10 day heat dome for the month carries only moderate to low confidence, meaning that particular scenario is plausible, without yet being the dominant outcome across all the forecast systems being compared. Separately, one meteorological outlet that had been skeptical of the more extreme forecasts noted that a round of widely reported, never seen before, heat predicted for Germany the following week was already fizzling out in newer model runs, with rain forecast across large parts of the country from the 25th of July through early August instead. That kind of disagreement between forecast runs is normal at this range, and it is exactly why meteorologists describe the specific details, exact peak temperatures, exact hail or wind risks, as only refinable a handful of days out, even while the broader trend toward a warmer than normal August remains consistent across nearly every model being run. Here's the comparison that puts this summer's pace in real context. In 2024, Europe's heatwave season played out very differently, arriving as a spring event in March and April with a peak temperature of 33.3 degrees Celsius, followed by a separate summer heat wave running from June through August that ultimately peaked at 46.8 degrees Celsius at Agios Vasileios in Cyprus. A later Nature Medicine study found that 2024 killed more than 62,700 people from heat across the continent, one of the deadliest seasons in the modern European record. That season, brutal as it was, still followed a more traditional shape, a spring event and then one long summer event. 2026 has broken from that shape entirely, compressing 4 distinct waves into roughly 10 weeks, each one arriving with less recovery time than the wave before it, which is precisely the pattern currently straining hospitals, wildfire crews, and drought-stricken farmland that has had almost no chance to recover between episodes. There is also a broader seasonal driver behind why the models keep agreeing on more heat rather than less. Forecasters tracking longer range patterns note that a Super El Niño event is currently forecast to push toward record strength, heading into the winter of 2026 into 2027. El Niño years tend to reshape ocean heat distribution and wind patterns across the Pacific in ways that ripple outward into the atmospheric patterns steering weather over Europe and elsewhere. Part of why this year's setup keeps producing the specific ingredients, persistent high-pressure ridges, and reduced Atlantic storm activity that these repeated heat domes depend on to lock in and hold their position. So what does all of this actually mean for you if you live anywhere in Europe right now? It means treating this summer as a single heat wave with a start and an end date is no longer the right way to think about it. The right way to think about it is as a rolling risk that keeps reloading, wave after wave, roughly every few weeks, with each new wave capable of arriving on top of ground, water supplies, and emergency services that have not fully recovered from the last one. It means the drought currently drying out soil across Spain, France, and the wider Mediterranean is not a separate story from the heat. It is part of the same feedback loop. Dry ground heats the air above it faster than moist ground does, which means every heat wave that passes through makes the next one more intense by drying the ground out further first. And it means the wildfire risk currently forcing event bans in places like Gironde is very likely to keep reappearing in new locations as the pattern shifts eastward through the rest of August, following the same corridor the models are already projecting. So here is the honest, grounded summary. Europe's 2026 summer has produced 4 separate heat waves rather than one, each one arriving with less recovery time between episodes than the wave before it, and the 4th wave, currently driving record wildfires in Spain and France, has not even finished before forecasters are already tracking a fresh, more expansive heat dome building across the continent for the start of August, one projected to push temperatures past 40 degrees Celsius widely and potentially as high as 45 degrees Celsius in the hardest hit areas. Long-range models largely agree that August will run warmer than normal across most of Europe, with the strongest, most confident signal sitting over the Mediterranean and southeastern Europe specifically, even though the exact timing and intensity of any single new wave still carries real uncertainty this far out. Compared to 2024's deadly but more traditionally shaped season, this year's compressed, repeating pattern is precisely what is straining hospitals, firefighting resources, and drought-stricken land that keeps getting hit again before it has any real chance to recover. We will keep tracking this the same way we did today, straight from the Met Office, Copernicus, the European Center for Medium, range weather forecasts, and the meteorologists actually running these models, not recycled headlines. Subscribe so you do not miss the next wave forming, because based on what we just walked through, it is very likely already on its way. And leave that comment below. Tell me whether the heat where you live has actually let up at all this summer, or whether it feels like it never really stopped. Because behind every one of these forecasts is a firefighter in Gironde bracing for a fire season that officials already expect to run past the 8th of August. A farmer in Iberia watching soil moisture disappear a little further with every passing wave. And a meteorologist right now are staring at a model run that just tilted the odds toward yet another one.